43,200. Remember that number, said Carla Jacinto. 43,200 is a number that represents the times that Carla Jacinto had been raped as a victim of sex trafficking. Carla was first lured by a sex trafficker when she was only 12 years old. A man 10 years older than her approached her with candy and a very sweet story. After 2 weeks of knowing this man, Carla Jacinto was convinced to get into his vehicle to take a trip. She had just become his victim. Her story is one of millions of sex trafficking survivor stories. The purpose of this speech is to inform the audience about the brutal reality of human sex trafficking. Human sex trafficking is infamously underreported. The numbers that have been reported are a fraction of the brutal reality and problem. We will discuss the impact of human trafficking, who the targets are, and how we can be more diligent in keeping our society safe. Human sexual trafficking victims come from different socioeconomic levels. Traffickers target anyone, anywhere. Their victims can be any race, any age, any gender. An estimate of 800,000 people are trafficked and 1 million children are exploited and pushed into the commercial sex trade annually. Nowadays, social media and the internet play a huge part and role in the forms that traffickers use to lure their victims. False advertisements of modeling, dancing, and acting are being used to kidnap, seduce, or coerce the individuals. Women victims of sexual trafficking are perceived as foreigners being born elsewhere, when in reality 44% of the victims are U.S. citizens. Our youth hold the greatest risk of sex trafficking. A history of abuse, neglect, having been part of the child protective services, or their sexual orientation are key risk factors. It is estimated that 1 out of 6 youths will become victims of sex trafficking. Targets of sexual traffickers come from all places. Not only are traffickers updating the way they lure their victims, but they're making sure to entrap them by finding their weaknesses. It's important to understand that anyone can be the target, but what can we do to solve this and make and keep our society safe? Internet safety is one way to avoid being lured into human sex trafficking. Love146.org is a web page run by a group of people from around the globe informing about 5 safety rules of thumb, sexting, red flag words, and what to do in case you see yourself involved being lured into sex trafficking or see something suspicious. Another way to look for signs is through a person's behavior. Observe them and try to identify if they're the victim or the trafficker. Do they seem frightened, depressed, anxious? Look for physical signs: bruising, bites, burns, hair missing because of it being pulled, malnourishment because they're not eating correctly. A loved one or someone close to you or an intimate partner can be a sex trafficker without you being aware of it or knowing you're being trapped into it. Look at the way you're being treated. Is it normal? Are you able to go out without any problems? Is there punishment involved? We can live under human trafficking conditions and either be afraid to speak up or blinded by your aggressors with the way they talk to us, the gifts they provide. Learning to recognize the signs of human trafficking will allow us to speak up, prepare and obtain as much information as possible to put a stop to this money-making industry. 43,200, the number to remember. We discussed impact, targets, and the way we can keep our society safe. Human trafficking is a worldwide crime that is not talked about in most cases. Let's open up our eyes, our ears, our mouth, and make a difference.